Lydia and Beetlejuice ventured into the Lover's Lagoon, her eyes widening in surprise as they approached what was supposed to be a gentle swan boat ride. However, instead of graceful swans, a pair of eerie sandworms emerged from the water, their gaping mouths filled with rows of sharp teeth. As they climbed into the sandworm-shaped vessel, Lydia couldn't help but notice the strange transformation. The once ominous and spooky atmosphere of the theme park gave way to an overly romantic setting. The lagoon was now adorned with dark, twisted vines, and the moon above cast an ethereal glow on the waters, the soft swishing of waves audible as the boat swayed gently under their weight. To Lydia's surprise, Beetlejuice underwent a remarkable change as well. His usual ghostly attire transformed into a crimson suit, reminiscent of one he wore on their almost wedding day, crappily tailored and totally out of style. His mischievous grin remained, but there was still a certain kind of charm in his new appearance. It was tacky, yet creepy, at the same time. As the sandworm boat glided through the Gothic lagoon, Lydia found herself caught between awe and unease. The melodramatic music playing in the background added to the surreal ambiance, setting the stage for a peculiar romantic encounter. With each passing moment, the tension between Lydia and Beetlejuice grew. For one terrible moment, she wondered if she'd slap him if he tried anything funny. Or would she let him? Still, she remained silent as the sandworm boat floated beneath a moonlit arch, its glow casting long shadows across the water. "I'm not going to marry you," Lydia finally warned, doing her best to scoff at the overtly romantic gesture. She wasn't stupid. He'd do anything to get free. Anything, including trying to woo her. Beetlejuice put a hand to his heart and pouted.
30 years is a long time for an engagement to last, honey buns, by any standards. Don't you think it's time we tie the knot?
Lydia shook her head, but let out a chuckle anyway.
You're delusional. You love it.
He winked and relaxed into Lydia, his arm still over her shoulders. To her surprise, Beetlejuice looked mighty pleased about their new position, giddy even.
You know,
he said with a lilt,
we wouldn't have to go through this whole circus if we just got hitched. I'd blow this joint quicker than I can beat the bishop, you know what I mean?
He snickered. And then what? Lydia asked unwittingly, but discovered that she really did want to know. What was the end goal for the ludicrous poltergeist?
Huh?
Beetlejuice replied with a furrow of his brow.
Then what will you do?
Lydia turned completely to face him and stared at his profile. His Roman nose drew her eyes first, the pallor of his skin, save for his eyes that were ringed in dark circles. Blue.
After you're free, I mean.
No matter how much she fought it, his blue, piercing eyes always seemed to see right through her. She'd even acknowledged the strange bond when she first met him. But why? Why on earth was she attracted to this Casanova clown? As she took in her companion, Lydia realized there was no use denying it anymore. What had once been nightmares of the poltergeist's return had slowly become wishful dreams, which slid neatly into an obsession. Even if she wanted to lie to herself, Lydia knew full well that it was the main reason she threw herself into witchcraft and occult studies.
"I'll go home,"
came a murmured reply, followed by the soft ghosting of a finger trailing over her cheek. The unexpected touch snapped Lydia out of her musings. What had they been talking about again? Oh, what he'd do, if he were free. Go home.
Home? Why? I mean, who says you can't go home, but where is home anyway?
He stared into nothing, face somber, and lacking any of the boisterous energy he usually had, and shrugged. His head lolled towards her to meet her eyes, his own eyes resigned and lost.
I don't know. Never really had one, alive or dead. But I've always searched for it anyway. Sounds like someone I know.
His lips twitched into a wistful smile. Shit. See, it was moments, small moments, like these that did her in. Doing her best to keep a straight face, Lydia swallowed.
Will you haunt people out of their homes?
He grinned.
Probably. Idle hands and all that.
When he took in her face, he let out a boisterous laugh.
I'm kidding, jeez. Put that glare away. Could kill a guy all over again. But to be completely honest with you,
He sighed and rolled his eyes.
my perimeters would be tied to you if you actually choose to get hitched with this old geezer.
He thumbed at himself with a crooked smile. Lydia gasped, not quite believing her ears.
Oh, so you taught me? Again?
I mean,
He dipped his chin and narrowed his eyes.
would that be so bad? You'd have a poltergeist at your disposal. Babe, I will do anything for you if you just...
He groaned and waved his hand around.
Get me out of here.
Say I believe you.
Lydia hedged, twisting her fingers.
If, and I'm not saying I would, but if I let you out of here, how would I do it?
Beetlejuice drew closer, close enough for Lydia to feel his breath dance across her skin.
Just say the magic words, princess. We both know you know 'em by heart. Then I'd get my juice back, snap my fingers, and get Elvis to marry us this time. The dude owes me a favor.
A short, hysterical giggle escaped Lydia. Imagine that, she thought. The problem was, she actually could imagine it. A zombie Elvis officiating at the end of this disgustingly romantic ride in a carnival for the dead. There were plenty of reasons not to consider the ludicrous idea of marrying a dead man she hardly knew. Oodles of reasons not to. So many red flags that Lydia might as well be at a car dealership. But life, very much like the theme park, had lost its luster. As a little girl, the first bit of shine had been dimmed at the same time her mother passed. And then he appeared, lounging on a balcony of a tiny brothel without a care in the world, polishing the brassy thing Lydia's life had become into something she could endure. It had been years since she'd experienced that thrilling, fluttering thing in her gut that told her she was alive. He made her feel that way. Lydia closed her eyes, her heart thudding in her ears.
Beetlejuice.
That's one.
He murmured, brushing away a hair as he spoke into her ear.
Keep going.
Shuddering, the touch brought her mind back into sharp focus. She needed to read the fine print.
So that's it?
Lydia replied, opening her eyes and making a strong effort to appear in control as the little boat drifted along.
Just say your name 3 times and you get your powers back, just like old times.
She finished with a hesitant whisper.
And all you want is...
I want to go home.
Beetlejuice said, no teasing in his tone whatsoever.
Take me home, Lyds.
And with that, Lydia took a deep breath and closed her eyes, her next words drifting through the silence of the tunnel.
Beetlejuice,
she said again. He leaned in close and nuzzled her jaw with his sharp nose.
That's it. One more.
Before we do anything hasty,
she said instead of his name for the 3rd time,
we should finish what we started here.
Beetlejuice dropped his head to her shoulder and groaned petulantly.
Why?
He whined and stomped his foot. Feeling confident and a little more bold, she patted his thigh reassuringly.
Because we aren't the only ones who want to feel alive again, Beej.
If she could help the other wandering souls here, then she would. There was silence before Beetlejuice placed his hand over hers, that still laid on his lap, and stroked her knuckles with his thumb, gliding a sharp, blackened nail over her astral flesh. She shivered. A soft sigh escaped the ghost, relaxing further into her side, whether from relief or defeat, she did not know.
I figured I had no chance in hell with someone like you,
he uttered into the crook o' her neck.
I haven't said no.
Beetlejuice's head snapped up, blue eyes spearing through her once more. He searched her expression and seemed to find whatever he was looking for.
I knew you were a keeper from the first moment I laid eyes on you.
Considering I was 15, that's a bit concerning. Didn't you get in trouble for that before?
Beetlejuice waved a hand dismissively.
You know what I mean.
The Lover's Lagoon ride had been both enchanting and eye-opening, but they moved on to the next attraction, as Lydia requested. While embarking on one exhilarating ride after another, their hoots and laughter filled the air. She felt an electrifying sense of weightlessness in her gut, as the roller coasters delivered heart-stopping drops and twists. Even with daring loops, scream-inducing, gravity-defying rides, she couldn't help but notice Beetlejuice's genuine smiles and fondness in his eyes whenever he glanced her way. That couldn't be faked, right? The errant thought had been whisked away when yet another delighted cackle arose from the poltergeist, gazing at her with stars in his eyes. That boisterous, larger-than-life-or-death laugh could be something she could live for. Even the repeated attempts at fondling her ass, which she secretly delighted in, were forgiven. As expected, the nearly dormant park lit up with more color. Happy attendees could be heard wherever the living woman ventured. The once somber parkgoers radiated with excitement and joy as they joined in the revelry. But time was ticking. Lydia couldn't shake the concern despite the great time she was having. As they moved from ride to ride, she worried her friends wouldn't make it to the big top in time. The Ferris wheel offered a good view, however, and Beetlejuice grinned with smug satisfaction.
I think we're gonna make it, babe.
He seemed pleasantly surprised. It was clear that Bertha and Prudence had carried out their roles with exceptional speed, and before Lydia knew it, it was time for her ghostly partner to race to the finish line. Hand in hand, they flew through the twisted paths of the theme park and finally came to a halt at the lair of the ringleader. In order to ensure the safety of her friends, Lydia made the difficult decision to request their return to their physical bodies, promising that she would rejoin them soon. Prudence, her concern evident in a pointed look, and Bertha, her mischievous nature shining through a salacious wink, grasped their silver chains and vanished from the astral plane. With her friends gone, Lydia turned her attention to Beetlejuice, who stood before her, his charismatic grin unyielding, and wearing a very familiar striped suit.
Ready, babe?
He winked, extending his hand toward her. Lydia sighed, a hint of amusement lingering in her expression, and shook her head, a small huff escaping her lips. Yet, without a moment's hesitation, she slid her hand into his, their fingers intertwining effortlessly. The ghost's face broke into a wide grin, a mixture of relief and surprise dancing in his eyes as they stood together, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As Lydia and Beetlejuice stepped into the ominous tent, the two eerie clowns, their painted faces frozen in unsettling grins, stood guard on either side of the entrance. A shiver ran down Lydia's spine as she swore one of them locked eyes with her, but that was impossible. She had never touched them. Pushing aside the unnerving encounter, she focused on the task at hand, the weight of their mission overshadowing any lingering unease. As they walked deeper into the tent, their eyes were drawn to the sight of the ringleader. He stood at the center, his giant grin stretching wide across his face, his applause slow and deliberate.
"Ah, Beetlejuice!"
the ringleader exclaimed, his voice dripping with a mix of delight and satisfaction.
"I must admit, I had my doubts whether you could accomplish the task, but you always manage to surprise me, don't you?"
Beetlejuice grinned back at the ringleader, a blend of arrogance and gratitude in his expression.
I'm full of surprises. Keeps things interesting. And I always keep my end to bargains.
His smile turned dangerous.
Can you say the same?
With a mischievous chuckle, the ringleader snapped his fingers, summoning a troop of monkeys adorned in traditional carnival attire, striped pants, tiny red hats, and long chains locked on their ankles. They looked like a sorry bunch, mistreated and uncared for. Swiftly, they arranged a round table, placing a less than pristine white tablecloth atop it. Adorned with frayed lace doilies, the surface transformed into an oddly elegant display. One monkey graciously pulled out a chair for their leader, who settled himself with an air of regal patience. Oddly enough, Beetlejuice and Lydia noticed that there were 2 seats across from the ringleader. Lydia froze like morning dew in winter. Did the ringleader know Beetlejuice wasn't alone, or was it just a coincidence?
"Well, what are you waiting for? Sit!"
The aforementioned being sneered in artificial hospitality. They obliged him, not knowing what better to do. As Lydia shifted uncomfortably perched atop her little steel stool, she couldn't help but notice how their seats were cold and hard, while the ringleader's was soft and cushy. And it might be just her imagination, but she could have sworn their stools were shorter than his chair. It resulted in her having to look up at him, and she wondered if Beetlejuice had to do the same. She could imagine he wouldn't like that. A corner of the ringleader's upturned mouth twitched upwards in a gnarly smirk as he surveyed Beetlejuice.
"As you were saying, you're full of surprises."
Beetlejuice shot him an unamused sneer.
"That's one more thing we have in common, my dear Mr. Juice,"
the ringleader said. He seemed to be intentionally dragging this whole farce out for his own amusement.
"I did say you could be free as a crow. That is, A couple centuries sooner than your contract stated initially.
Two of the monkeys came waltzing back with platters of food and drink. To her surprise, Beetlejuice reached for a snack, but instead of bringing it to his lips, he crushed it with his long, bony fingers and let it crumble to the floor.
I see,
he murmured dangerously. He stood up so fast that he kicked his metal stool to the side with a loud clang. His voice was saturated with white-hot anger, and she could tell that it was taking every fiber of his unearthly being to keep it contained.
You promised freedom in exchange for increasing your crappy ticket sales, not shorten my sentence.
Oh, I don't deny that you could be free eventually. I just never mentioned when.
The ringleader cackled like a cursed banshee.
If you wanted me to free you immediately, well, you should know more than anyone that I don't have that kind of power.
And with that, he dusted off his hands and reached for a drink.
Oh, I think you can manage to suck the right dicks upstairs to get what you want. Done it before, haven't ya?
Beetlejuice jeered. The ringleader gasped and clutched his pearls. Then he chuckled and sighed, setting down his glass. It was filled with a dark red liquid that looked eerily similar to blood. The two endless black voids that he had in place of eyes seemed to look deep in thought.
You know how things are done here. For complete freedom, increasing the ticket sales at my park is not enough compensation for that. What I need is...
He looked vaguely in Lydia's direction.
An equal trade. A life's worth of freedom in exchange for another's life.
Lydia's eyes widened in alarm, and she had to bite back a loud gasp. How did the ringleader know she was there?
Don't look so surprised,
he said, as if reading her mind.
It's almost comical. This is my domain. I know everything that goes on here.
Meanwhile, Beetlejuice's mouth was set in a hard, firm line. He was glaring at the ringleader with the animosity of a feral animal, his anger radiating off him in waves. Though his glare seemed to have no effect on the ringleader, it made Lydia shift in her seat.
You're not taking her,
Beetlejuice snarled, spittle flying across the air in the ringleader's direction.
Over my rotting corpse.
Well, that helped ease Lydia's mind just a bit. The ringleader laughed.
I knew you wouldn't go for that deal. She's too precious a commodity for you to risk like that, isn't she?
Lydia didn't understand what the wicked man meant, but the importance of the occasion was not lost on her. Her hands curled into fists, red crescents of her nails imprinting in her palm.
She's special, isn't she?
The ringleader continued, smug, when Beetlejuice only glared at him, taking his silence as answer enough. When Beetlejuice still provided no response, the ringleader reached across the distance and curled a long yellow fingernail under Lydia's chin. This time, she really did gasp, paralyzed with fear as she cast a panicked look in Beetlejuice's direction.
You're special, little lady. Did you hear me?
Get your fucking hands off her,
Beetlejuice growled. Quick as a flash, he lunged forward and seized his arm, twisting it roughly behind his back. The ringleader hissed, forcing his body to turn around, while his long, gangly arm contorted to a terrifying degree. In his gnarled hand, a whip appeared, and it lashed out with only a flick of his wrist and struck Beetlejuice square in the face.
Ow!
Beetlejuice's head whipped back, head spinning from the forceful blow. He clutched at the round table for balance, but before he could recover, the ringleader's whip rose like a serpent and cracked an uppercut to Beetlejuice's chin. His head snapped back painfully with an awful crack, causing him to see stars. He stumbled backwards, crashing into his fallen steel stool.
Ugh!
He groaned. The ringleader laughed, teeth sharp and glistening. He raised his hand once more. The whip split into 9 tails, each swirling and all ready to strike.
No!
Lydia yelled, fisting the tablecloth so tightly the lace started to rip.
Get up, Beej! You...
The ringleader shoved her out of the way as he lunged toward the fallen poltergeist with a maniacal cackle. Beetlejuice struggled to his feet, only to dive back to the floor, narrowly dodging a merciless whip cracks. A flash of metal caught Lydia's eye, shining like a star in the tent light. Blades, deadly blades. The whip had blades at the ends. Things were going to get real ugly for Beetlejuice if she didn't do anything. In an act of desperation, Lydia cried out,
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice!
The ringleader twisted, all 9 tails of his whip pointing directly at her.
You wretched witch!
As the blade struck for her, a surge of otherworldly energy tore through the poltergeist's body, and a pulse emanated from his ghostly form that blew the ringleader's whip out of his hands. Beetlejuice flexed his fingers, the sound of his knuckles popping like tiny fireworks. He stood tall, his hand poised by his head, a mischievous spark dancing in his deep, sunken eyes. With a sly grin, his fingers snapped once. The sound of tiny chains breaking filled the air, and then all was quiet, until a torrent of monkeys erupted from the skies, a chaotic mess of panic and fury.
Man, you really stepped in it with this indentured servitude thing,
Beetlejuice quipped, a wicked satisfaction curling his lips. His gaze followed the monkey uprising with a twisted sense of delight.
Looks like these little guys ain't too thrilled about how you've been running the show here either.
The ringleader's face twisted into a mixture of anger and disbelief.
Hey, those monkeys are under my command!
Before Lydia could fully process the tension, the atmosphere shifted. A sickening crunch sliced through the air, and the ringleader's figure crumbled backward, crashing into his chair. Beetlejuice had struck with a speed that defied the eye. Lydia hadn't even seen him move. Beetlejuice nonchalantly adjusted his crooked tie with a snort.
What do you say we feed his sorry ass to the primates, huh, babe?
He quipped, a wicked glint in his eyes. The ringleader groaned, rubbing his aching head as he struggled to sit up. As the scene seemed poised to escalate further, the monkeys sensed the impending chaos. With a coordinated frenzy of movement, they advanced, chattering with a mix of excitement and vindication. Their tiny eyes gleamed with hunger as they licked their lips in anticipation, an eerie chorus of sinister snickers weaving through the air. But just as the tension teetered on the edge of pandemonium, Lydia sprang into action. She dashed between the 2 opposing forces, her voice cutting through the air.
Stop it, both of you, just stop.
For a moment, everyone seemed frozen in place by her command. Lydia's mind raced, and a plan began to take shape. Whether it was a good plan or not didn't matter. What was important was the fact that she had an idea.
Listen,
she panted, her voice steadier now.
We've got a choice here. Instead of fighting, how about we find a solution that works for everyone?
The young woman turned, her astral form facing the ringleader with unyielding determination etched across her features.
6 months out of the year, 6 nights a week, for 6 hours a night, I'll help revive the park, and in return, you'll set Beetlejuice free for the same amount of time. But I can quit whenever I want.
The ringleader's laughter cut through the air, a cold and cynical sound.
And what happens to him if you quit?
He goes back to the dunking booth for the rest of his new sentence. The work we did still counts.
Hey!
Beetlejuice protested, but was ignored. The ringleader glared at Lydia, rage radiating off him in waves.
Why would I agree to that?
Lydia smirked and pointed upward at the monkey cloud.
Because if not, I think your former employees might want more than a few words with you.
The ringleader went pale for a moment, then regained his composure as he clapped his hands slowly, appraising Lydia from head to toe, as if he were seeing her for the first time.
Quite the poetic offer you've got there. You'd willingly do this for him? Do you even understand who he is? What he really is?
Beetlejuice's stance tensed like a coiled spring.
I'd zip those lips if I were you,
he growled under his breath. The ringleader's voice carried on, unaffected.
Oh, my dear girl, releasing him into the world of the living? That's an invitation to absolute chaos. And don't be fooled. His real aim is to claim your life for his own. He won't find another like you for many lifetimes, maybe even centuries with the way things are going. Can't you see? He's using you.
The weight of the truth settled in the air like a dense fog, as the tangled web of motives and intentions became clearer. Amid the swirling chaos, Lydia clung to Beetlejuice's intense gaze as he confronted the ringleader. Whether Beetlejuice deserved whatever was happening remained uncertain in her mind. His anger felt genuine, human even, and she hesitated to believe it was all a show. Moreover, there was an enigmatic quality about him that intrigued her, a mysterious allure that tugged at her willingness to trust.
Doesn't matter,
Lydia stated resolutely, her focus on ending Beetlejuice's torment.
That's my final offer.
The ringleader's face twisted with a mix of frustration and annoyance.
Limited time offer.
She pressed firmly, her voice unwavering as she reached for her silver chain. A swift glance passed between the ringleader and Beetlejuice. The ringleader seemed to realize that tangling with the mischievous spirit would likely result in a fruitless standoff. His options were stark: concede to Lydia's proposal, or engage in an ongoing battle with Beetlejuice. While neither option was all that appealing, one definitely was going to result in a bigger headache than the other.
All right,
The ringleader grudgingly conceded, his tone edged with dissatisfaction.
your terms are fair enough. The new contract ends with your life, unless you willingly break it sooner.
That clause is bullshit.
Beetlejuice drawled.
I must insist, Miss Dietz.
The ringleader's warning tone causing Lydia to second-guess herself.
Don't listen to... Deal. Hey!
He shouted again and stomped his foot, crossing his arms with a pout.
What the fuck?
He whined. She narrowed her eyes at him.
Think of it as my insurance, just in case you decide you want to take over the world or some corny shit like that, and I have to end you.
The poltergeist glared, but Lydia returned the gesture in kind, until he rolled his eyes and grunted out a petulant,
Fine.
Beetlejuice was at Lydia's side in a flash, his wide eyes wavering with uncertainty. She knew he hadn't expected Lydia to offer her own freedom in exchange for his. There was an odd fondness in his gaze as he locked eyes with the young woman.
You sure about this?
I am.
Lydia said. She reached for the silver chain protruding from her astral navel and tugged on it a little. Then Beetlejuice retrieved his own chain, and together they brought the links close to each other, until a bright flash of astral energy surrounded the two of them in an ethereal glow. Their chains wound around each other countless times, tying themselves together. Lydia and Beetlejuice both shivered, feeling the tremor of new energy latch onto their astral forms. For the rest of her life, Lydia would be forever bound to the world of the dead, but she found she didn't quite mind. Later that night, long after Lydia had vanished back to the realm of the living, Beetlejuice sat in the Lover's Lagoon ride alone. The waves of the water sloshed against the ride in a comforting manner as he closed his eyes wistfully. He could still remember the sensation of her astral flesh pressed against his ghostly being, a light but warm pressure that delighted the very tendrils of his soul. He could still hear her voice in his head, the low and sarcastic tone she used, but also the rarer, softer voice that reminded him almost painfully how mortal she was. He looked down towards his belly, taking in his own silver cord protruding from it. It was now intertwined with hers, and glowing subtly in the dark. The sight of it made him feel something funny inside, a slight happy tickle in the darkest pits of his heart. Beetlejuice might not have achieved his ultimate objective, marriage, but this was good enough for him right now. He would have all the time he needed to convince Lydia to marry him. Then, the real fun would begin. Thank you for listening. You can find the written version of this story by clicking the link in the description. Please like and subscribe for more, and let me know what you think of this story.